Darren, what have you found out?
Do you know, I completely agree with Tom Hunt there. Who doesn't love a bit of British beef? But, you know, you mentioned that report there that talks about structural inequalities and institutional racism. Well, Dan, I'm pretty sure that banning boilers, banning petrol cars and causing inflationary pressures on energy bills impacts everyone the same, you know, whether you're Arthur or Martha, gay or straight, black or white. I think it shows something, it reveals something to me about the way in which there is identity politics merging with this green movement that's capturing in its entirety not just the Conservative Party, but the levers of state as well. And the other report that you mentioned as well earlier in the show, referencing taxing meat and taxing flights. On the flight point, Dan, I've seen some suggestions from the Green Extreme in just today, actually, reported in The Guardian about banning flights. Of course, all of these people live in London, Dan, and they don't realise that in banning domestic flights, it isn't just about travelling for work within the UK. It's about people taking connecting flights for international hubs and all the rest of it. What's someone in Scotland or Northern Ireland supposed to do without connecting flights? These people seem to believe, genuinely, that the world stops at the Watford Gap, right? And that we up here in the North East and elsewhere don't exist to them. Now, number 10 Supremo, former number 10 Supremo, I should say, and Durham lad, Dom Cummins, he said that these things have to be approved by departments. So ultimately, as much as the government may deny it, you read out the denial earlier in the show, these are discussions that they're clearly having in some of our nation's biggest government departments. And it all comes, of course, ahead of that UN climate summit, COP26, in which the world's elite will gather, speaking of flights. Not the world's biggest polluters, by the way, like China, they're not going to be there, no way, Jose, but the world's elites will be there, no doubt by the oh-so-eco-friendly method of private jet, straight into Glasgow, which, by the way, Dan, the Telegraph report, they'll all be greeted by the sight of SNP management. And in that, I mean Glasgow is set to be full of streets caked in rubbish, blocked roads, withdrawn trains, glued down protesters like those Irritate Britain lots. Sorry, I mean Insulate Britain lots. And rat infestation due to strikes and protests. And if you ask me, Dan, this embarrassment that's likely to come, and we'll see next week, it's Sunday 31st, this sums up the lack of thinking and the sort of wing and a prayer approach of all of this so-called thinking behind the net zero target. And bombastic Boris, Dan, he's going to be pretty embarrassed. I'm telling you now.
Darren, the thing I don't understand about this, right, is that why would the government and a government department fund this research into making us all stop eating meat, into trying to shame business travellers? Why would they fund this if they had no intention of looking at the findings and considering the findings?
I mean, you only have to look at what a week it's been. All of this talk about a Tory boiler ban, right, that risks freezing Britain. And when the simple solutions, to me, the simple solution for the boiler ban would be to not replace them with these useless and regressive, expensive heat pumps. The solution for me would be to warm our homes using the hot air that's generated by, I think, current government rhetoric on net zero. You could keep we're all warm for decades, Dan, if you were to use the amount of bluster and bravado that's coming from Boris Johnson at the minute. I think ultimately that's why these reports are being compiled. It's because they are exactly in touch with some pretty radical steps being taken by Her Majesty's government. Boris Johnson has adopted the Green cult's credo with glee. He has completely thrown out everything he once believed in, being low tax and all the rest of it. We now are genuinely seeing the kind of sort of proselytising Greta Thunberg Extinction Rebellion lot, their policies, their preferred policies, being brought forward. I mean, Boris speaks about how he passes on jokes, doesn't he, during speeches about how there's not going to be green shirts of the boiler police or sandal-clad feet coming in and taking our boilers out. But I'm sorry, Dan, renewables, dicing with renewables, or unreliables as I call them, you're playing with the livelihoods of millions of your first-time voters in places like this, and that's no laughing matter. And I posted to Twitter, Dan, that I'd like to see a referendum on net zero, and I completely stand by that. And I swore I'd never get involved in another referendum again, by the way, but in a similar fashion to how I viewed our relationship with the anti-democratic EU, I see the Green movement as being a fundamentally anti-democratic one too. Because if you consider that from the Climate Change Act of 2008 under Gordon Brown to the net zero by 2050 commitment under Theresa May, the British people have never, ever been given a say on everything from those boiler bans, energy bill increases, potential meat taxes, flight bans, you name it, all of these proposals. And interestingly, Richard Tice's Reform Party, I was at Conservative Party conference, and Richard Tice's Reform Party drove a bus around that conference that said Tory boiler ban will freeze your gran. And I think this is going to become a key battleground electorally for the Conservative Party, in which their voters in places like this one will view that net zero target as being responsible for ruinous bills, for the fact that they're having to, rip out boilers potentially and all these other things. And I think Boris will ultimately come to regret becoming essentially the high priest of this decadent, regressive and out of touch green cult, Dan. I really, really do.